Hello and welcome to Terrain Oddity. My name is Jay and today I'm going to be showing you how to make concrete road barricades for your war games. And now in this case I'm going to be doing mine for Marvel Crisis Protocol City board. You could use this for 40k, you know, the usage is up to you. And they're going to look something like this, but I realise the lighting in here isn't particularly good, so you'll just have to wait for the pictures at the end basically. But I ultimately think it's very easy to achieve and very effective, and I really quite like them. The materials that I'm going to use two different kinds of material. I'm going to use varying thicknesses of extruded polystyrene of insulation foam board, which is about, well, I've got one that's 1 centimeter thick and I've got one that's 6 millimeters thick. Now I prefer the 6 millimeter one, but we'll talk about that in a moment. I also make one just using foam board, so your standard cheap foam board that you can buy in any like hobby store. And if I'm honest, I think I actually prefer this one. So I'll get on to cracking to showing you how I did it. If though you like this video, do consider pressing like, that helps. If you're not subscribed and you're interested in terrain, right, please subscribe, that also helps. And if you really wanted to like push it a bit further, you know, I would be more than happy if you join me on Patreon. There's a link in the description, but don't feel pressured to do that. But you know, every little helps, as Tesco says. So hopefully that explains what we're going to do. I'm going to have to very boringly show you a diagram first, because when I just filmed this and tried to explain it, it was a little bit hard to do. So I'm going to show you a picture of what it is first, and this is what we're making, essentially a concrete block that you can use to block roads, etc., or cause driver lanes and that kind of thing. So that's what we're making, and then I'm going to show you what appears to be a more complicated drawing than what it really needs to be, right? So this is the first thing we're going to do. Well, the basic shape we're going to make is an upside down T. So we're going to make this shape. That makes sense, right? We're going to make that shape. And the way we're going to do that is by cutting two pieces of our material. Now, I have said I'm going to use 3 different materials, so you can use foam board, and these are my dimensions for the foam board. If you wanted to like screenshot it, I'll put it in the description. These are my dimensions if you use a 1 centimeter thick bit of extruded polystyrene. Foam board is 5 mil, by the way. Generally, you can get varying sizes, and extruded polystyrene is 6 mil. Well, if you use the 6 mil stuff that I used on my board, then you know you can do that, and that's actually my favorite. So the reason I'm actually using the 1 centimeter one here, I personally find this not to be the right size for this scale, but your scale may vary. It's a little bit easy to mathematically explain this one, right? So it's essentially going to be 2 pieces of your material. So the length, by the way, this 8 here that I've written, that was determined by me looking at my board, finding out that each of my lanes is about 8 centimeters in width, and I thought, well, I want 2 of them to sort of block a road. So I've gone with 8 centimeters. And again, your scale may vary. The one here, this particular one, and this one here, that's the thickness of the material. So for foam board, that'd be 0.5 or 5 mil. Do you know what I mean? It's the thickness of material. You almost can't change that unless you have a wire cutter, which of course I don't. And what we're going to do is we're going to have one block that sort of is in the middle of a bottom block. So I'm going to call this the base. This is the base, and we'll call this the top, right? So to cut out the base, we've got our length, which in my case is going to be 8 centimeters, and our width here, I actually recommend to be a minimum of 3 times the thickness of your material. So for this case, I recommend it to be 3 centimeters because that's 3 times 1 centimeter. But for the foam board, I actually went here with 20 mil. Now, obviously 20 mil is actually not, it's more than 3 times the width of the material, but I was a little bit worried that it would be a bit wobbly. So I actually went with 2 centimeters in width. You can play around with it. These materials aren't expensive, so feel free to just cut it out and play around with it. And I'll get onto what this the diagonal thing is in a moment. For the top bit, it's again the same length, 8 centimeters, and for, well, we'll call it the width, but you could maybe call it the height. We're going to do an 8x2 rectangle for the top part. So the bottom one is 8x3 and the top part is 8x2. Obviously the thickness of the material we can't change. I've literally given my recommendations for the other materials, so if you get stuck, just pause this and reference this. Other than that, now I will get on to showing what we're going to do, but essentially, I wonder if I can do this live on the fly. Essentially, we're going to cut those 2 parts, and then we're going to cut out this part of the base. I've not done a very good job here, so do forgive me, but we're going to cut out this part of the base and be left with that sort of like triangular bottom shape, and then we're going to glue the top onto it. That makes sense? I'll show you the cutting out now. So as I said, we're going to cut out those shapes. I've just demonstrated my sizes to you. I'm going to use an 8 centimeter in length. The techniques, as I said, apply literally to all 3 materials, so you do not need to worry about that. It's literally the same technique. I'm just showing you on my 1 centimeter thick material here. So I'm going to do my 8 centimeter in length. My width of the base is going to be 3 centimeters, so 8 by 3. The thickness is obviously 1 centimeter. Cut that out. And then for the top part, it's going to be, again, the same length, 8 centimeters, and the width or height, whatever you want to call it, in this case is going to be 2 centimeters, and the thickness is 1. Right now, because we did our bases 3 times the top part, we know we can just measure it 1 centimeter each side and be done. You might have to trim various lengths. For example, I wasn't very good at cutting, so instead of cutting it 8 centimeters, sometimes I do 8.1 and I'd have to like slice a little bit off. When you're cutting either foam board or this polystyrene, it's really good to have a nice new fresh blade because it will slice through the material, and that's really what we need here. We want nice clean cuts. I don't do particularly nice clean cuts because I'm lazy and don't change my blade enough, but you know, don't follow my follow my advice would be my recommendation. So once we've got our top part and our base in that T shape, we now need to cut off the corners of the base. Now you can, if you want to, just judge it with your eyes, get your top part, put it so it's roughly in the middle and mark it with a pen. You know, you can just do that. If you really want to, you can measure it out. If you've got, like, in this case, 3 centimeters is very easy to find the middle, but you know, for my foam board recommendations, I'm recommending like 2 centimeters, so the middle's a little bit harder to measure. Feel free to measure it, feel free to judge it with your eye. I don't think you'll go too far wrong. So what you want to do is you mark the top of it, the top of your base, with your pen where the middle is, and then what we're going to do is we're going to draw a straight line. Like, you don't have to be precise, we're not doing like 45-degree angles or whatever, you don't have to be super precise here. We're going to draw a straight line from that point that you've just measured right to the bottom corner of your base, and you'll see what that means like on the screen hopefully. Once we've done that on both sides, we're then going to have to cut this out, and this part is the trickiest part. I recommend a nice fresh blade, and I recommend being extremely careful when you do this because the pieces aren't very big, the knife is very sharp, and it's quite a difficult procedure to slice through it. So be very careful. If you're very clumsy, I would recommend just not doing it. I didn't cut myself, but you know, I probably came very close, so just be careful in this part. And all we're going to do is we're going to take our knife and we're going to put it on the line that we just drew, and what we're going to do is try and cut it as straight as possible all the way down to the bottom. Now try and line that up with the markings that you've done on the bottom side, so you can you have like a something to aim at. But you know what, it actually doesn't matter because of the step what we're going to do next. Like, it really doesn't matter if you're a little bit off with this. So don't worry about being too precise, just make sure your hands are safe. That's the most important thing, and that you've got a reasonable diagonal cut. So you want to slice through it, get over it if you want to, so you can see that you're going straight, but just as straight as cut as possible with a nice fresh blade, so you're slicing rather than dragging it, which, you know, I didn't use a fresh blade, but meh, that's just here or there, neither here nor there. And you want to do that on both sides. Now you can imagine I'm doing the 1 centimeter thick foam here. Doing this with foam board is even more like detail orientated because it's smaller, so do be careful. Once you've cut off your corners though, we have our sort of like shape, don't we? We have our top part, and it will just dry fit it so that it looks approximately correct. These materials aren't traditionally very expensive, so if you make a mistake, just cut out some more. Like, it's really they're not that expensive. So, you know, cut them all out. Cut as many as you want. Obviously, you need 2 pieces per concrete block. Just cut out as many of those as you feel appropriate for whatever you want to make. And then we've done with the hard part now. Everything else is very easy from this point on. We are literally going to glue these 2 pieces together. You've got a nice little slot to like glue it onto. So I'm personally going to use hot glue, but you can just use PVA if that's all you have. PVA will take longer to dry. Hot glue can melt foam, so neither is a particularly great option, but I just prefer hot glue to just whack it on and get it done. hot glue it on or PVA it on, glue them together, and you've got your shape, right? You could paint it up and call it a day there, but what I want to do is the little seams where we've glued our base to our top part, there's a little line, and I don't particularly like that. So what I'm actually going to do is get some filler. Now for the extruded polystyrene versions of this, I'm just going to try and fill in the cracks. Filler, by the way, is spackle, I think, for the Americans out there. I'm just going to try and fill in those crevices, and I'm going to really water down I'm going to get water on my finger and really make sure it goes into the crack and try and not get that much on the foam, because I want the texture of the foam to sort of represent the concrete. But you know what? It actually doesn't matter too much, because on the foam board, not only do I fill in the cracks doing this, I actually cover the whole thing in filler for the foam board, the 5mm foam board. And what you really want to do, you really want your finger to be wet. You want to try and make it literally almost as smooth as you can, because we don't want these thick finger lines or anything like that. You almost want it as smooth as a wet finger will allow, because the texture will be there. It's almost impossible to smooth it too much. But you know, you can, even if you don't smooth it enough, you can even get some sandpaper and smooth it. So there's no panic there. But for the foam board, I cover the whole thing in filler, and for the polystyrene, the extruded polystyrene, I'm just filling in the crack. And we've got our shape, we've got it there. All we really need, we've done with the building side of this, we just really need to paint it. Now I cover this stuff in a black paint with some PVA and a little bit of water. But in this case, I'm actually going to use matte Mod Podge with black paint and a little bit of water. I saw that on Blackmagic Craft. I just wanted to see if it makes any kind of difference. But you know, black paint and PVA is fine. You probably don't even really need to use the PVA. I'm just trying to firm it up. We've already covered some of it in filler. Cover the whole thing in black. And then you want to find a nice colour for concrete. Now I'm actually using neutral grey, which is a standard grey acrylic paint, and I'm going to mix it in with a little bit of buff titanium, just because I really like that colour. I think it really looks like concrete. And what I'm going to do is, I wouldn't even call this a dry brush. I'm 95% over brushing this. Like, I'm covering 95%, I'm probably even more like 98% of this material. I'm just going to cover this in that grey. I don't water down the brush though. I do sort of dry brush it, and it does leave sort of darker patches with lighter patches. And at this point, Katie was like, that actually looks quite good. However, you know, I wanted to do it like I'd done my board, so what I actually do, I then dry brush it with a lighter grey, and then I actually put a black wash on it. Now I know this sounds possibly more complicated than it really needs to be. Before I even put the black wash on it, I actually sponge on different variations of greys, darker greys, lighter greys, etc. Because I'm a lunatic and there really is no need for that. But once I'd sponged it on, I then did my wash, which sort of brought it all together. And then ultimately I gave it a dry brush with the original colour, like an approximate same mix, and then I dry brushed it again with a lighter grey, and I think I ultimately dry brush it with a white. But when you get to white, you always want to be very careful. Don't wipe your brush off so it's sort of still a little bit grey, and just be very careful when you get to pure white, because you know, ultimately you could overdo it. If you do overdo it, put a black wash on it and just start again, like, you'll be fine. You know what I mean? And that's it, done. Like, ultimately, hopefully you found that easy to follow. I do apologise for actually showing you a diagram at the start of this rather than how you actually make the terrain. I was just a little bit apprehensive that maybe the footage didn't explain the concept strong enough, but hopefully you're with me now. And yeah, so I made 3 versions, as I said. The thick version using the 1 centimeter stuff. Katie preferred that. She said that was the better size. But when I put that on my board, it just looked a bit too big and didn't really fit my scale. So the 1 centimeter stuff I didn't particularly like personally. Katie preferred it though. I preferred using the 6mm foam that I also made the table out of. So for me, it was a handy material and I already had it. I just feel like it's a nicer scale. Obviously, without the miniatures, I don't have the core box just yet. For Marvel Crisis Protocol, I mean, perhaps I won't know until I truly find out. But I think the shape of it's fine, and I think the look of it is fine. But I really like the texture on the foam board. Now you can't see it here, but the foam board one covered in filler just really, I think, really had a strong, like, concrete look about it. Like, it was really effective, and I was sort of taken aback by how good it was. So just using foam board, pretty perfect. If I was gonna critique it a little bit, I'd say the bottom bit, because it's only 5mm in thickness, is perhaps a little bit too thin. But you've got to go with what you're given, basically. The foam board, I was really strongly surprised by how good it was. Not that I'm blowing my own trumpet though, like I'm saying my own work is fantastic, but the foam board as a material was more than competent, more than decent. So if you are stuck with just foam board, you can follow this tutorial just the same. The technique for cutting it is exactly the same. So obviously my measurements are here if you wanted to follow them, but the techniques for cutting the diagonal, making the T, and then cutting the corner off is exactly the same depending on what you use. The only difference there is the size of your cuts and that kind of thing. And I've literally, the three versions that I've made, I've literally laid that out for you, and they are the exact sizes that I made. So if you want to follow along, there's your materials. So I can't get off this because I can't work my computer, but hopefully you enjoyed that. Hopefully it was easy enough to follow. If you like this video, do press like, as I said at the start. It really does help. If you're not subscribed to the channel and you're interested in all kinds of terrain, like, please do. I'm trying to build the channel, and I'd be really grateful for that as well. If you want to go that like extra step, you're like, Jay, you're incredible. I mean, I don't know whoever would say that. I don't even think my mum would say that. Then you can consider supporting me on Patreon. I would really appreciate that as well. Hopefully you found that easy enough to follow and you enjoyed it. I think it looks really decent. Any questions, just ask me in the comments. I'm always here. If you want to show me your stuff, there's a Facebook group, there's a Discord chat channel kind of thing, so come join me there. I do hope you have a most beautiful day though, and I hope you make these because I think they're pretty easy to do and pretty damn effective. Have a most beautiful day. Goodbye.